Okay, everybody hear me, okay. If you don't know who I am, I'm Jim Moreland, and I'm famous at Rolling Green for doing bingo. So if you haven't been to bingo, shame on you. So somehow I volunteered to give this talk about my life. None of what I say can leave this room. Top secret. Well, I was born in 1944, February 25th, in the University Hospital of University of Pennsylvania. So I guess that means I'm from Pennsylvania sometime in my life. I am the first Moreland to be born in the United States. My father was born in Belfast, Ireland, and my grandfather got thrown out of Ireland in 1921 because he was a Protestant. You know, the Protestants and the Catholics have been at war for a long time in Ireland. They gave him a choice: prison or United States. So he came to the United States, and I'm glad he chose to come to the United States. It was at the end of World War II. My dad was finishing up his degree in chemistry from the University of Pennsylvania, and my mom was working at a munitions plant in South Philly. And since they figured out they couldn't take care of me and both work and go to school, my grandparents took care of me till my dad graduated, and they raised me after that. But my grandfather managed a 5,000-acre farm on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. The owner was Lamont DuPont Copeland, who was the president of DuPont. So that was quite interesting to get to meet all the hobnob with all these people that they brought down. They did hunting and fishing and all this. So I moved to West Virginia, Parkersburg. DuPont built a new plant, made lucite, and my dad worked in the old lucite plant in Philadelphia. They built a new one, and so my dad got transferred to Parkersburg. Of course, it didn't make any difference to me. I was just a little kid, didn't realize it was supposed to be a hick town, you know. I spent elementary school in Parkersburg, moved. My dad got transferred back to Delaware, and I started high school in Delaware. What a shock for some teenage boy. Go there, and West Virginia was 48 out of 48 states, the worst education system in the country. Delaware was one of the top. I can remember first day of school, went in, had all my grades, and they said, "Oh, we're so lucky to have you. You're going to be in all the advanced classes." And I said, "What's an advanced class?" But anyway, I survived, I guess. When I was 12 years old, I learned how to drive a stick shift. It was my grandfather's Jeep truck. I drove everywhere, even 12 miles away into the local town of Chestertown. He knew everybody, everybody knew him, so I drove him. So first day driver's ed. I had a girl who was a partner, and the driver's ed instructor said, "Who wants to drive first?" And I said, "Well, we'll let her drive." "No, I don't want to." "Go ahead and drive." So all we did was go down this driveway and everything. Came back, we changed places. I put that baby in first gear, laid rubber all the way down the driveway. The guy down had a heart attack. I said, "I'm sorry, but I can drive." You know, the guy shaking like that. So my dad had to come in, talk to him, or else they were going to throw me out of driver's ed. So. But anyway, I survived, got an A in the course. In 1960, I was 16. And thanks to my grandfather, he said, "How about coming down working on a farm?" And I figured he was going to give me all the easy jobs, right? Shoot. I had the hard jobs. So I worked on the farm that summer. When you pick up bales of hay and pitch them up, my fingers were so raw right there. Even though I had gloves on, I couldn't move my fingers. So my grandfather said, "Did you learn anything?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What did you learn?" "Study hard so you won't have to do this for a living." It stuck with me. I went to the University of, gotta give you the best part. 1 year, President Biden and I went to school together. And he always thought he was a ladies' man. I guess he was till he started hugging on my girlfriend, and I gave him a good one. My mother liked him. She would not talk to me for 2 weeks. And he'd come over, even though I gave him a black eye, my mom would hug on him and all. I'm gone. I'm leaving. But anyway, we made up and we're friends. We both went to University of Delaware. Only class I had with him was Delaware history. Requirement for every student at University of Delaware to take a 1-credit course in Delaware history. And Joe's big deal was, "Come on, man, let me see your homework." He says that a lot now, too. "Come on, man." I said, "Hey, why don't you read the stuff yourself?" So he got somebody else to help him. I got a 99 in the class, and he got an 83, so that tells you. I had a ROTC with him. Every male student during the Vietnam War had to take ROTC, and which meant once a week you had to put your uniform on and go to drill. Joe says, "I'm not wearing it because I don't want to wear it to class." Well, most people are smart enough, if you're a boy, to realize you don't schedule a class right before the drill. You have a class off so you can go. Not him. So anyway, he flunked ROTC the first year. And that's what bothers me. He's now the commander-in-chief. And he flunked ROTC because he wouldn't wear his uniform. But that's past. Where he studied history, I studied chemistry because I thought I was smart. I thought I wanted to be a dentist. So I looked at prerequisites, and all you had to do was take chemistry, physics, biology, and get all the credits. You didn't have to graduate from college, apply to dental school, and get in. My uncle was the dean of admissions at University of Pennsylvania. I was going to go to dental school, and I figured, I got it made. So I went up. My uncle said, you know, gee, Jimmy, I wish I could help you, but Penn requires an undergraduate degree to go to dental school. I said, you mean I wasted all this time just taking this? So I went back, talked to my advisor, and he said, you got a couple problems. I said, what? You took French. To be a chem major, you gotta have German. Oh, so I mean, I gotta have two, okay. So I said, what's my other choice? And he said, well, I see that you wanted to go advanced ROTC, and they disqualified you because you had kidney problems when you were in 10th grade. And I said, yeah, they said it was like latent nephritis. So anyway, he said, well, you don't have to worry about being drafted because you got a 2Y, no military service during peacetime. I said, yeah, there's a war, was never declared. So I said, oh, I don't have to worry about being drafted. So I took an internship with DuPont, and I worked for a guy that had a PhD in textile chemistry. And he said, why don't you let me take you up to Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science on Saturday, see if you're interested, I'll help you get in and see what happens. So we did it, I liked it. I did a research at DuPont for the internship, so I worked for a year with them, then I went up to Philadelphia Textile and studied textiles, which turned out to be pretty good, except a few years later, what happened to the textile business in the United States? Unless you speak Chinese, it's not here, or Pakistani, or whatever it is, so it'll come back. So when I graduated, I went to work for DuPont. I was a process control supervisor, big term. I had 18 lovely ladies working for me. 9 did the dyeing and 9 did the physical test, and they made nylon. We made nylon at Seaford, Delaware. Largest nylon plant in the world. And shift work. Here I am, you know, just married and all this. And I'm, 4 to 12, 12 to 8, you know. This is ridiculous. I didn't go all this school to do all this. So anyway, I had an uncle that we had Thanksgiving at his house, and he said, I can tell by the way you're acting, you don't really like that. And I said, yeah, I don't. He said, well, look, I have a friend that's a vice president with Hercules. I ride to work with him every day. I'll talk to him. About a week later, I got this phone call. Well, Ann took it because I was at work. Said they wanted to interview me on a Thursday, whatever it was. So I went up and interviewed them, and they said, we're going to hire you, send you to Charlotte. And I said, oh, okay, sounds good. So I moved to Charlotte with my wife, and that was strange too. Everybody that I worked with went to North Carolina State University, Auburn University, Texas Tech, and here they had this guy from Philadelphia that was working with them. But in the end, I ended up knowing more than they did. I'm glad. My only problem was I went around and talked about how good a basketball team University of South Carolina had. I didn't know all these Clemson people hated South Carolina. They said, what? I said, well, don't you all root for the best? No. So I had to change my game plan. So that was interesting. One of the first thing I did, how many people know Marshall Field's department store? Well, all their sheets and towels were made by Fieldcrest. And that was one of my accounts. And one of the first things I did was, they said, hey, we'd like to go to Atlanta, go see Georgia Tech, and stay over and watch the Falcons play. And I said, yeah, I can handle that. And they said, well, bring your wife. Okay, so we do that. Little did I know the trouble I was getting into. Like most families, the wife runs it.
Amen.
Okay, so I went and the customer said, your wife was wonderful. My wife had such a good time and did all this. Well, when we had an 800 number that people would call in and put an order, they never used the 800 number. They'd call my wife and say, Ann, take this down, here's our order number, order it for us. So of course I got called on the carpet. And I said, what's the matter? We got the orders. And they said, yeah, but they don't go through the 800 number. I said, who cares? They liked my wife, so they called the customer and they said, if we're gonna buy from you, we order from Ann. I never heard another thing about it, so she did that. It gets even better. They said, well, we want you to handle these paper mills. So I was just getting my feet wet in Charlotte, and they said, we're gonna transfer you to Roanoke, Virginia. And I said, why Roanoke? And they said, you wanna go to Richmond? That's terrible. So I said, we went up, got a place in Roanoke. The reason that they put me there was a big paper company called Westvaco. And I was supposed to babysit that company. So we moved, and one of the technical directors said, we're gonna come to Roanoke next weekend. And my wife collects doll babies and doll houses and all that. Good. So they came, I invited them out to my house. This guy's wife and my wife hit it off. So, a couple of times a month, she'd come by herself, my wife and her would go out, do all this stuff. This one account bought 11 rail cars, a product, every month. 110,000 pounds each. And they said, how did you do that? I said, I know, ask my wife. I got a call from the general manager on a Saturday. Why didn't you give us more notice? Hey, I just found out about it. He said, well, you know, we have to find those rail cars and we have to schedule. And I said, wait a minute. You told me my job was to sell. That's your problem. It isn't mine. I got the order, you got to fill it. So every tough place they sent Ann and I in to try to get the business. Had another federal paper board. We had every year the paper industry had a big convention, and all the people who were anybody all went. This was in Atlanta. And they said, we got to tell you, you got to handle Harry and his wife. Nobody will fool with them. Somehow, Ann got in good with her. They went all over Atlanta on the Marta that they had. They thought it was great. The customer called up and said, every 2 months you got to bring Ann with you when you come over here. And my wife and your wife are going to go into Norfolk and do all this stuff. So, had a good time. So that's why Ann didn't come. She couldn't stand me telling these stories. So that was really, really something. And when I first started, I had a guy I worked with that used to work in a textile plant. And he was like the head of one big major department. And he was supposed to train me. And he said, look, you got to know everything that you can possibly learn about all of these operations in the plant. Why? He said, so you can walk through and see something and you go to the manager's office and say XYZ, and they know that you can help them. Even if your product is not as good as the other guys, you're going to help them out by pointing out things. So I learned right from the ground up. I spent 6 weeks working in a weave room at Dan River Mills in Danville, Virginia. The weave room was 93 degrees and the humidity was 94%. After 5 minutes, you were just didn't have dry clothes on. But I learned all this stuff, so it paid off later on. I was in, Burlington was the largest publicly owned textile company in the world. I was in the plant, purchasing agent's office with my boss, and the guy's phone rang. He picks it up. He's talking in Spanish, hangs it up. He says, my boss's name was Charlie. Charlie, that's our vice president from Cuernavaca, Mexico. He wants to send you to send somebody down there for 10 days and help him out. And my boss, I looked at his face, and the purchasing guy said, by the way, he specifically mentioned Jim. My boss looks at me like, how's he know you? Well, he went to Philadelphia College in textiles too. And apparently some other Burlington people had been talking about me doing something, so he wanted me to go down to Mexico. So I went to Mexico. Never been out of the United States. Here I go to Mexico. Don't speak any Spanish. I did like a few tacos, but. So I go down there, and these guys are walking with rifles on their shoulders. What's going on? Well, the bad guys come in here and try to hold up, you know. I said, I don't get one? They said, no. So, third day I was there, was a Thursday, was payday. The guys come up and they try to hold up the office outside, the guard place where the bank brings the money to pay these guys off. So I had just walked past there and I saw this car pull up and people jump out and run in there. So I just kind of stood back on the sidewalk. Well, they ran out to get in the car. One guy was last. I put a tackle on him. He still remembers to this day. Nobody could believe it. So I held him till the police got there. They beat him up pretty good. He told them who they were. But I saved their big payroll. So anything that I said went. So they were complaining about the product I sold looked like sugar. And you dissolved it. When it dried, it made a film. And they coated the yarn so they could weave it. And they were trying to get more production out, and it was all dried in a rotary dryer. And whatever stuck on the inside of that got real hot, it turned brown. Well, when they grind it up, it put these little specks all through this white stuff. It's like a big thing of sugar with pepper. So they said, oh, we got this whole place is full and we can't do anything. So I went out, found everything they were doing wrong. And, I figured, they can laugh. So I said, actually, I wouldn't complain. What do you mean? I said, those are power pellets. What? Yeah, they're power pellets. They run twice as good as the other stuff. And they'll charge you more if you complain that they didn't know they shipped it. I sold 1.5 million pounds of product that very day that had the brown specks in it. So they called me Mr. Power Pellet. And they said, why did you tell them that? And I said, I knew there was nothing wrong with it. Yeah, and I said, so? It ran good. So that was what I was in Mexico, Power Pellet. So that was, so then, let's see. Then I got moved to Greenville. They came to me and said, we got some problems in Canada. Why does it always have to be me? Because you're the only guy dumb enough that'll volunteer and do it. So off to Canada, solved that problem, and there was a company called Humpty Dumpty. They made potato chips. Well, they said, and I didn't sell anything at that time that would help them out. So I went in and they said, we have this in our kettle, it boils over. And I said, do you use a defoamer? No. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. I'll see if I can get you some. Well, I knew the company I worked for had some defoamer that they sold into the food industry, but I didn't have anything to do with that. But anyway, I got them some, solved the problem. For 2 years, every couple of months, I'd get a big box full of Humpty Dumpty chips. Just like Lay's. Okay. So I skipped over kind of the interesting part. For 1 year, when I was in high school, I went to high school with the current president of the United States. And when I transferred from Delaware to Philadelphia, he stayed there and whatever. I kind of lost touch with him till like early 72. And that's about the time Joe was running for state senate. Okay? And he and his wife, Nelia, had a little girl, Naomi. And right out behind where my parents live was a really long, steep hill with a stop sign at the bottom. And all the tractor trailer trucks that are going up the highway would take this as a shortcut. Well, one day she pulled out in front of this guy in a truck and he ran over and killed her and that little girl. Which is what got Joe elected to state senate. The story was the guy was drunk, did all this. Nah, she ran the stop sign. So anyway, he became state senator. My dad was on the school board, and when I moved there from Charlotte under federal order was doing forced school busing. And Charlotte was like going crazy. Well, when I got back to Delaware, Guess what? Whose turn it was? Delaware to do forced school busing. And President Biden went on TV and said he wasn't going to allow his kids to be bused into the city of Wilmington. But today he's, everybody likes him. That was it. So politics is so rotten.
Amen.
There was a guy named Bill Stevenson that I knew when I was at Delaware. He played linebacker for the football team. He was a good-looking guy, 6'3", muscles. Guess who his wife was? Jill. So she was 18 when they married. She was good looking back in those days. I took a look at her a couple times myself, but that's before I knew my wife. So she married him, and he bought this property 3 blocks of the University of Delaware, turned it into a bar and rock and roll place. And he was big into rock and roll music. And he would have all these rock groups come in there, and they packed the place with like 5,000 people and all. So Jill had a lime green Corvette. Funny, that's what Joe bought her, a lime green Corvette. And the story goes, I have to assume it's true, Bill got a phone call one afternoon and said, your Corvette's been in a fender bender. Is my wife okay? And they said, yeah, she wasn't driving. Joe Biden was driving. So he figured out what was going on because he was doing campaign and she was working for his campaign. My mom worked for his campaign. So I used to tease her. Did he pinch you? She said, I'm going to smack you. I said, well, he's famous for that, isn't he? He always did it in college and every place else. But my mom worked for his campaign. But she was too old, I guess. So anyway, that's how he married Jill. And they had a kid, Ashley, who, strange enough, went to school at this little private school close to where they live, where my sister was the music teacher. So she liked Ashley, and she liked Jill and President Biden. So she's having a fit because she lives in Ormond by the beach in Florida, and everybody likes DeSantis, and she can't bring herself to even say the guy's name. So I said, why don't you write Joe a letter and tell him to come on down and visit you? I'm sure he would. So anyway, my mom and my sister were friendly with the president.
Jim. Hello. How did you meet Ann?
How did I meet Ann? Oh my gosh, I guess I could tell you. I had a friend that went to University of Maryland, and that's where Ann went. And they had a sorority party, and so it was a girlfriend of mine, not my steady girlfriend. She invited me to come down, and while I was there, I met this girl named Ann. And I knew her when she was a little kid because her father dated my mother back when they were in high school, okay? Little town. And my aunt and Ann's aunt were sorority sisters, did everything together. So I met her at that thing and never paid much attention. And about a month later, I get this on my front door. My sister went and answered it. There's some strange lady out there. So I went and looked, and I said, oh, you're Ann. Yeah, what are you doing here? I thought I'd come by and see you. We're moving to Newark, which was like 10 miles from my house. That's how we got together. So my sister had a frying pan in her hand, was gonna chase her. So yeah, I was the oldest. I have a brother 2 years younger, then 12-year younger sister. So she chased her with a frying pan. Wow. So that's up to the point where they called me into the office in Atlanta and they said, we need somebody to do Mexico and South America.
Oh my God.
What do I have to do? Get down there and sell. Oh, by myself? Yeah, well, we have an agent. They'll help you out. Do they know anything about paper or text? No, well, they're not gonna help me out. So I used the guy I knew in Mexico, Javier Fernandez, to put in a good word for me, and I picked up a lot of business there. Then I had to go to South America. Oh, it gives me chills to think about. I'm in a hotel in a little town called Maracay, Venezuela. It's in a valley, huge mountains. One day I smelled smoke. Well, it was like 5 in the morning. So I said, wonder where that's going. I opened, looked out the window, the whole mountain is on fire. And I thought, gosh. So I called the front desk. They said, no problem. What? No problem. There's like 100 yards of nothing but rock between where the brush is and the hotel, so I figured it would burn out before I'd get to the hotel. Unbelievable. So that was you haven't lived until you go to some place like a third world country. And you look around, you see nobody that looks like you. You see nobody that talks like you. You go out to eat and you try to figure out, what is that on my plate? As long as it wasn't moving, I guess it was okay. You know what a capybara is? So it looks like a groundhog, but they swim in the swamps in South America, like a big rodent. So we go out and they said, we got a special for you.
Oh, no.
So they ordered this thing, you know, I thought it was rabbit or something. I said, what is it? Oh, it's a capybara. Oh, it wasn't too bad as long as you put a lot of hot sauce on it. So, I mean, I ate some stuff. If I think back about it, I will pass out. In Ecuador, 5-star hotel. Air conditioning didn't work very good. You know, they do those where they just run cold water and the air blows through it, so it's like 100% humidity, but you know, like 70 degrees. So my agent says, we're gonna really treat you good tonight. I said, what does that mean? We're not telling you. So we get in a cab and we drive like 15 minutes, this nice little restaurant. And I noticed in the plate glass window, guinea pigs. I knew what was happening. So he says, pick out the 2 you want. What? Give me that black and white one and give me that little white one. Guy grabs her, cuts her head off, skins them out. cooks it, brought it to the table. I sat there the whole time saying, I hope I don't pass out. Two of my granddaughters had guinea pigs. And they called them Chewies. Chewies. So I go visit my granddaughters and I get home and I said, guess what? And they said, what? And I said, we're gonna skin those 2 guinea pigs and have them for dinner.
Oh my God.
But after, you know, they weren't that bad. But it's the stuff they said, we're not telling you what it is. That you have to get really, they're big on drinking brandy. Drinking brandy. Coffee, brandy, you know, a couple of, well, when you don't eat a lot all day and you're going and you have like 4 shots of this 100 proof brandy, a couple of beers, you know, the whole room is like kind of moving, you know, you just go with it. I kind of got used to that. Mexico City, they picked me up at 6 a.m. and it would take 3 hours to go from one side of Mexico City to the other because of the traffic.
Oh my God.
So I wouldn't get a breakfast. Go in the plant and do all this stuff. 12:30, they'd say we're going to dinner, whatever. So we go to this place. First thing they do, tequila for everybody. You know, you have 3 shots of that, couple of beers, and then I'm going, wake me up if I go to sleep. And I used to tell them, I don't remember anything when we got back to the plant. What did I do? They said, you were all right. You tripped a couple of times, but you know, I don't know what I did. I must have done whatever it is right because they like me, but so that's the only thing I hated about doing all those. One more good story. I'm starting to be an old man now.
Oh.
And I'd retired and I got this phone call. Jim, we need you to go to Pakistan. I said, I'm retired. We'll make it worth your while. Oh, yeah, what the heck? It can't be any worse than Venezuela or Ecuador. Little did I know, that was completely wrong. I left at 1:30 in the afternoon on Delta, flew to Cincinnati, took another Delta to New York, got on Air Dubai at midnight, flew over to Lahore, Pakistan. It was like a day and a half later. So it's like 6 in the morning, I get off the plane, there's a couple of guys with a sign, Jim. So I figured they were after me. Hey, I'm Jim. They got me in the car, got my bags, we drove to this beautiful hotel. The guys are out with looking under the cars, make sure there's no bombs. So they said, go take a shower and everything, we'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. I looked, it's 7 o'clock. I said, I hadn't slept in 2 days. You'll be all right. So 8 o'clock, sure enough, they picked me up. And I said, I gotta eat something. So they said, another hour, we'll go to a Pizza Hut. So we go to Pizza Hut. I want a large pepperoni pizza. We don't do pepperoni here, only chicken. So they were the worst food I ever ate in my whole life. If you like curry, you got it made. Curry. I smelled like curry for 2 weeks when I came home. Okay, we're in Lahore. We're going down a road that's 2 lanes on the right, 2 lanes on the left, 4 lanes of traffic on the right, and 4 lanes of traffic on the left, but only 2 lanes each way. And they're blowing their horns and they're, what? the lady I was with was a PhD textile chemist, and she said, oh, it's like this, we'll be about an hour getting through this. We finally pulled up, and there was a guy in a water buffalo cart right ahead of me. Beside, I said, Aisha, can I pet that buffalo? She said, go ahead. I put the window down. That thing jumped, kicked the guy out of the cart, took off, ran up on the back of a car. I hid down in my seat. So I didn't smack any more water buffalo. A couple days later, we're at the hotel. And this was right before Easter, by the way. And I had clothes on. I did have a sweater. And I said, do I stand out in this crowd? Everybody's dark complexion, got those outfits on that they wear, you know, like a dress for a man or whatever they are. The guy said, nah, you don't stand out at all. So I asked the manager, I said, could I have something without curry? Oh, you no like curry? No. So anyway, it was happened to be Easter Sunday. Of course, they're Muslim. They picked me up and we went to work on Easter Sunday. But they did make the same breakfast. They just didn't put curry in it. But that was quite interesting. I was supposed to stay 2 weeks. Next week, we were going to go to Islamabad. And that's the place where the rebels would do all this bad stuff. 2 hours before I was supposed to get on the plane, I'm riding to the airport. The agent, cell phone when he talked, oh, okay. You're not going to Islamabad. They blew up the hotel. So I said, okay, tomorrow morning, you take me to the airport, I'm going home. What? I said, yeah, hey, this is too dangerous. I'm not staying over here and getting blown up. So I flew back and that was it. One other horror story. I'm in Medellin, Colombia, and I hear this gunfire. And there's a river about where the lake is. And I could hear all this gunfire. What's going on? That's the rebels. What? Yeah, they're right over there. At night, if you look, you can see the flash of their guns. Said, you guys got any guns? Why? The government took them. I said, well, if I could have a rifle with a scope, I'd sit on my balcony and I'd see where that flash came from. I'd take out 4 or 5 of them for you. They said, no way. I said, you bet. So they couldn't find a gun. I guess I'm lucky. But I went to school with a lot of kids whose grandparents, fathers, uncles owned textile mills in South America. And so first thing I did was get out my old alumni list and see where I called them up and said, hey, it's Jim. I was your lab partner. Oh, where are you? I'm at Sheraton, Medellin. Oh, so I called on all those places. That was the easiest sales I ever did. What are you selling? Okay, we'll buy a truckload, 40,000 pounds. Have to ship it. So I hit all that. That was pretty good. Scary. You go to bed in the middle of the night, you don't know whether you're going to wake up the next day. So, let's see. How am I going to end this on a happy note?
How did you get to Greenville?
How did I get to Greenville? Oh, when my eldest son was graduating from high school, he wanted to study textiles like I did. And Roanoke is not too far, hour from the border of North Carolina and Virginia, about another hour and a half to Raleigh, where NC State was. And when he was in high school, we went to a summer camp at NC State for textiles. And they said, he's great. We'd love to have him here. We're going to offer him a scholarship. I said, sounds good to me. So I said, why don't you wait until we go by Clemson and let you look at that place before you make up your mind. I don't want you saying, oh, I wish I'd have done it. So it was Easter. We took a trip to Florida to visit my in-laws, came back, spent the night in Greenville. I took him down to Clemson to visit the campus. So we went in, I knew the dean, we went in, talked. He said, we'll see you and your wife about 3:30 back here. Goodbye. We're gonna take him. So they had a really cute recruiter, just graduated. So she takes him all around. So when we came back, he said, God, Kathy's gorgeous. I said, hey, you don't think she's going out with you when you come here. She does that to all the guys. Oh, I said, too bad. So anyway, he decided to go to Clemson. So when I got back to Roanoke, I called my boss and he said, where are you going? I said, Greenville. Why Greenville? Well, you said I could go to Raleigh or Greenville. My son wants to go to Clemson. So he said, good enough. So that's how I got to Greenville back in 86. So my son got a master's in textile science from Clemson. I got my niece a scholarship, and she got a degree in design from Clemson, and got my son-in-law a scholarship, and he got a degree in textiles. And my youngest son, Jeff, got him one. He's got a PhD.
All at Clemson.
So they all from Clemson, and you know, they all enjoyed it. They had a good time. When they recruited my youngest son, they said, do you like football? And they wouldn't let me go to any of the, just him. But he said, yeah. So they took him over, unlocked the stadium at Clemson, let him go in, rub the rock, do the whole thing just like they do for football guys when they're coming there. So he said, this is it, I'm going here. So that's why he went there. You'll like this story. Okay, I moved to Greenville, Simpsonville, and that's where I moved over to here from Simpsonville. So my wife and I, we had a condo, had 2 stories. I had my knee replaced. I said, it hurts too much to go up and down all those steps every day. So she said, oh, well, I heard this place called Rolling Green, and it's a retirement community, and there's a lot of stuff to keep you busy and all this. So we came over and looked, and there was not one patio home for sale. So my place sold in 2 days. So I held them off as long as I could. So my daughter lived a block down the street, so we moved in for her for 2 weeks. And I said, hey, I'm moving in a tent, but I'm getting out of here. They don't watch the same TV I do. They don't do anything that I do. So we came out here one Saturday because the real estate agent said she heard the place on Millstead was going up for sale in 2 days and all that. We looked at it, did it, got a hold of them, made an offer, they took it, and that's October of 2018. So I liked it. My big thrill is doing assisted living bingo or healthcare bingo, because it's nothing like independent living bingo. If you don't do something right in assisted living, they let you know it. They go 2 to 3. And I said, hey, it's 5 to 2. Let's do an extra couple of games. We start at 2.
That's exactly right.
Hey, it's 3 o'clock. We quit. Okay, everybody gets a piece of candy. But in healthcare, we have a great time in there. Somebody over there in that pink sweater is the one that hooked me into it. But I wouldn't give it up for the world. It's so much fun. I'll tell one more story, and then it'll be time for you.
What year did you move in here with Ann?
Huh?
What year did you move into Rolling Green with Ann?
2018.
How long have you been here?
2018.
2018?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
November, October something, 18th, something.
You okay?
And the next, that was like the middle of the week. Saturday, somebody said they had line dancing. I've been line dancing ever since.
Yeah, he did.
But it's
I didn't hear that.
one thing, if you get bored, is you can volunteer in assisted living or in healthcare. They'd love to have you do some stuff. I mean, people just respond to you, just coming in and talking and doing things. As you know, I usually do Santa on Christmas. So, make my rounds, and I'm in memory care. And we're going around, and most everybody over there, even if they can't remember their kid's name, they know Santa. I promise. So there was a really sweet lady named Eva. And this broke up the
I
whole,
gotta be,
okay.
I gotta go to therapy.
Okay, that's all right. Eva broke the whole memory care place up. They go around, and if they're out, you talk to them. But she was in her room. They knocked on her door, opened the door. Eva, somebody's here to see you. She looks, and I walked in. Hi, Eva, been a good girl? She goes, Santa! Oh my God, she was like going nuts. So the nurse says, Eva, would you like a picture with Santa? Oh, yes. So we go in, they swing her legs over the bed. I sit down beside her, put my arm around her, and she says, Santa, are you a man or are you a woman? And I said, I'm a man. She said, oh, I haven't been in bed with a man for 50 years. Oh my God, for 20 minutes, the whole place roared. So every time I go over there, I go give her a big hug. She still doesn't know I was the Santa. And I didn't know she had a husband. Past Christmas, my wife and I were over there. And I said, where's Eva? Well, she's in her room. Well, this man came out of her room and came up the hall. And I said, hi, I'm Jim. I'm Santa. I heard all about you from Eva. And I said, did she have a good time? He said, she was the happiest I've seen her in a long time. So you never know what's going to happen. Independent living. I was a pilgrim, and some new lady comes up and says, you're kind of got your dates mixed up. And I said, what do you mean? She said, Halloween was a long time ago. I said, it's Thanksgiving, I'm a pilgrim. Oh. So you never know what's going to happen. But I want to thank you all for showing up and letting me go through all this. I tried to make it exciting. That's why my wife is not here. For those of you who don't know, she tripped over the dog Friday, fell right in the street, skinned all her face up, almost chipped her teeth, tore her knee up. So she's kind of stiff today. But that's why she didn't come. She said, I'll be too embarrassed. Oh, one more quick story. Thanksgiving. They told me, you gotta go down there and give a technical paper on sugar processing. What? Sugar processing? Yeah, you got 1 week to learn the whole thing. So, they gave me this slide presentation. So, I told my boss, well, I'm gonna take my wife. They said, good, go ahead. So we flew down there. Some little town outside of Caracas. So we went, and I was gonna give this thing. We pull up to the hotel. This guy comes out in a white coat, gets the suitcases, takes them in, puts them in front of the desk, goes around to the desk, puts on another hat, checks us in, goes back, puts on another hat, takes the suitcases to the room. Wow. So my wife says, find out what we can do on TV. I don't know if you ever watched SquarePants, SpongeBob, in Spanish. You haven't lived. But I gave this big talk, and I had a guy standing beside me. When I did he'd do it in Spanish. Then when I got done, about an hour, somebody said, are you doing question and answers in English? The whole place spoke English. And they made me go through this, then he would do it. What? So they said, well, we need you to come out and try this stuff. 100 degrees in the shade, and I'm working in the sugar place. The sugar water squirts out. You coat you. I was coated in sugar water, which eventually dried. I was walking like this. My pants were stiff. So I sold them the stuff, and they said, well, we want you to go to Cuba. And I said, no way I'm going to Cuba. So I didn't go to Cuba. But when I was in Medellin, it's pretty high up. I had a headache every day. Aspirin didn't do it. They said, coca tea. Coca tea. What? Yeah, cocaine tea. So I drank like 4 cups for breakfast. I didn't feel anything. Man, I did that every day for 5 days. So I'm at the airport. This colonel comes in with this big dog, and the dog's sniffing all these. I said, oh my God, they're gonna get me because they probably sweated out that cocaine. I'll have to call Ann and tell her I'm going to jail for 20 years. Well, the dog came and sat right in front of me and put both paws on my lap, and I swear my heart stopped. I said, oh, I'm dead. The colonel comes up and said, American? Yes. He said, yeah, you must have a dog at home. I said, how'd you know? That's what he does when you have a dog at home. So we're getting on the airplane to come home. And there's a man, a flight attendant, and a lady. And all the men were getting in the men's line. I get in the ladies' line. I get up in front of this girl, and she starts to pat me down. I said, go ahead. She turned like bright red and said, go on. Made her whole day, I guess. So, any questions?
You've had an interesting life.
I've had an interesting life, you're right. Oh, I have 8 grandkids, 1 great-grandchild. My grandchildren are 30, 28, and 25. 16, 12, 9, 7, and 3 or 4 or something. Unbelievable. We brought the little ones to lunch with their mom and dad. And I said, you can have anything you want. The middle grandson says, well, I want onion rings and French fries for lunch. And I'm thinking, no way Daddy's gonna allow you to have that. They let him have it. So the waiters all had a big laugh. Then dessert, one of those waffle cones. We had 9 waffle cones at the table. They said that's a record in the dining room for the most waffle cones at one table.
Oh my God.
So, what ice cream do you have? They go through every, I think I'll have vanilla. I said, come on, you don't ask them stuff like that. You just, you know. So, who volunteers for next month?
Bob Benson.
Bob?
Yeah, Bob
Yeah.
Benson.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, before you leave, one time I had to do something and I asked Bob, would you do bingo for me? This was when we were in the PCR. Bob said, I'll be glad to, so I gave him the rundown on how we do it. Well, while I happened to be off, they came in and took pictures. So if you look in the brochure out by Amy's office, when they talk about bingo, whose picture's in there? Bob's. He did it once.
We'll put you in there somewhere, Jim.
Yeah.
We'll redo it.
I
Put
know.
you in there.
But thank you all.
Thank you.